The alarm screamed across the command deck of the TSS Indomitable. Commander Taiyang stood at the center of the bridge, his dark eyes fixed on the massive view screen ahead. Red dots blinked across the star map, each one representing a dying world. 17 solar systems had gone dark in the past 3 months. 17 worlds where billions of people had lived, worked, and dreamed of tomorrow. Now those worlds were silent. "Commander, we're receiving another transmission," said Lieutenant Minho from his station. His fingers moved quickly across the holographic controls. "It's marked urgent." "Priority 1, Taiyang nodded. "Put it through." The image flickered to life. An alien appeared on screen, tall and elegant with skin that seemed to glow with soft blue light. The Luminari were one of the oldest races in the galaxy, ancient beyond human understanding. This one's face showed something Taiyang had never seen from their kind before: fear. "Human vessel, this is Ambassador Silth of the Galactic Council. We are transmitting on all frequencies, hoping someone will hear us." The ambassador's voice trembled. "The Voidborn swarm has broken through our defensive line at Sector 9. We have lost contact with the 5th Defense Wing. 3 billion souls on Valaxis Prime are about to die, and we cannot stop it." Taiyang felt his chest tighten. 3 billion? The number was too big to understand, but he tried anyway. That was half the population of Earth, men, women, children, all about to be consumed by monsters from deep space. "The Council has made a difficult decision," the ambassador continued. "We are sending this message to Terra. We know humans are new to the galaxy. We know your species has been in space for only 200 years. We know we rejected your application for Council membership 3 times. The alien's glowing eyes looked down. "We were wrong. We need help. The Voidborn cannot be stopped by our forces alone. If there is any mercy in humanity, please answer this call." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Taiyang looked around at his crew. They were young, most of them. The oldest officer on deck was barely 40 years old. Humanity had exploded into the stars with the speed and chaos that defined their species. 2 centuries ago, they were stuck on one planet. Now they controlled 30 star systems and had ships in 100 more. "Sir, what do we do?" asked Ensign Hana from the science station. She was fresh out of the academy, still getting used to life on a warship. Before Taiyang could answer, another voice cut through. "We go, obviously." Captain Yuna stepped onto the bridge. She commanded the destroyer Thunderstrike, part of the Indomitable's battle group. She was shorter than most of the crew, but she had a presence that made everyone stand straighter. Her ship had just docked for resupply. "The Council ignored us for decades," Yuna continued. She walked up to stand beside Taiyang. "They called us primitive. They said humans were too violent, too chaotic, too young to join their peaceful alliance."
"And now they want our help?"
"Yes," Taiyang said simply. "They do, and we're going to give it to them." Yuna crossed her arms. "Because that's what we do. Humans don't leave people to die just because those people were rude to us once." Taiyang smiled slightly. "I was hoping you'd say that. But it's not our decision alone." Within the hour, every ship commander in the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet had gathered on the Indomitable. They filled the conference room, 30 captains representing 30,000 crew members. At the head of the table sat Admiral Hyun, the man who commanded all of Terra's military forces in this sector of space. Hyun was old for a fleet officer, nearly 60. His hair had gone completely gray, and lines marked his face like a map of battles fought. He listened as Taiyang played the Council's message again. When it finished, Hyun looked around the table. "Opinions?" he asked. "It's a trap," said Commander Daehyun of the cruiser Relentless. "The Council sees humans as useful idiots. They want us to throw our lives away fighting their war." "It's not a trap," countered Captain Soman. She commanded a carrier group, 5 ships that launched fighter craft. "The Voidborn are real. We've all seen the reports. They consume everything. If we don't stop them at the Council worlds, we'll be fighting them at Earth eventually. That could be years away," Daehyun argued. "Or months," Yuna said quietly. "The Voidborn travel fast. They don't need supply lines or rest. They just eat and grow and move on. Right now they're pointed at the Council. Tomorrow, who knows?" Admiral Hyun raised his hand and everyone fell silent. "I've already made my decision," he said. "But I want to hear from all of you first. We're about to take 30,000 people into a war zone. Many of them will die. They deserve to know their commanders believe in this mission." One by one, the captains spoke. Some were reluctant. Others were eager. A few were clearly terrified but trying to hide it. In the end, though, 29 out of 30 voted to go. Only Commander Daehyun voted no, and even he said he would follow orders if given. Then it's decided, Hyun said. He stood up and everyone stood with him. We jump for council space in 6 hours. All ships are to be at battle readiness. Weapons armed, shields charged, crews prepared. We're not going there as diplomats or explorers. We're going as soldiers, the meeting ended. As the captains filed out, Taeyang stayed behind with Admiral Hyun and Captain Yuna. Do you think we can win? Yuna asked the Admiral. Hyun walked to the window. Through it, they could see the fleet assembling in space. Thousands of ships from massive dreadnoughts to tiny corvettes. The pride of humanity's industrial might, built in the orbital shipyards around Earth and Mars and a dozen other worlds. I don't know, Hyun admitted. The reports say the Voidborn are like nothing the galaxy has ever seen. They don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They just consume. The Council has been fighting them for a year and losing badly. So why are we going? Taeyang asked. Hyun turned to face them. Because somebody has to. Because 3 billion people on Valaxis Prime deserve to live. Because maybe, just maybe, humans can do what the ancient races cannot. We're young. We're reckless. We haven't learned that some fights can't be won. He smiled grimly. That might be exactly what this battle needs. 6 hours later, the Terran Armada jumped into hyperspace. 30,000 ships vanished from human space in a flash of light. Behind them, Earth waited nervously. Ahead of them, an enemy waited that had never known defeat. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Taeyang watched the swirling colors of hyperspace flow past. Beside him, Lieutenant Minho checked and rechecked the weapons systems. Everyone was tense. Everyone was scared, sir, Minho said quietly. Do you really think we can stop them? Taeyang thought about that question. He thought about the ambassador's desperate face. He thought about 3 billion people who would die if nobody helped them. He thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy that had called them too young, too violent, too primitive. I think we have to try, he finally answered. And when humans try, we don't do it halfway. The fleet raced through hyperspace toward a war that would change the galaxy forever. Behind them, the universe held its breath. Ahead of them, death and glory waited in equal measure. The Terran Armada did not waver. The Terran Armada dropped out of hyperspace into hell itself. Commander Taeyang's first thought was that the sensors had malfunctioned. Nothing could be that big. But the sensors were working perfectly. The nightmare was real. Valaxis Prime hung in space like a jewel wrapped in black chains. Around the planet, the Voidborn swarm moved like a living ocean. Ships that weren't really ships. Creatures that weren't really creatures. They were something in between. Massive organic constructs that pulsed and writhed and grew even as Taeyang watched. Some were the size of skyscrapers. Others dwarfed entire mountains. The largest looked like a small moon, its surface covered in what might have been eyes or mouths or something worse. Mother of Earth, breathed Lieutenant Minho. His hands shook on the controls. Count them, Taeyang ordered, forcing his voice to stay calm. Minho worked frantically. Numbers scrolled across his screen. I'm reading over 40,000 individual contacts, and that's just the big ones. There are millions of smaller craft. 40,000 against their 30,000. Bad odds, but Taeyang had seen worse in simulations. Then Minho continued, Sir, mass readings suggest each of those contacts is 5 to 10 times larger than our biggest dreadnought. Worse than bad. Catastrophic. They were outnumbered and outmassed by an insane margin. Any sane military commander would have ordered an immediate retreat. Admiral Hyun was not insane, but he was human, which sometimes looked the same. All ships, battle formation Delta. Hyun's voice came through the fleet-wide channel. We're not here to win a fair fight. We're here to save lives. Stick to your training and remember why we came. The Terran fleet spread out like a net cast across space. Destroyers and frigates formed the outer shell. Cruisers and battleships anchored the middle. At the center, the carriers launched wave after wave of fighter craft. It was a formation designed for exactly this kind of battle. Outnumbered defenders trying to hold ground against overwhelming force. Except humans weren't the defenders here. They were the cavalry, and the Voidborn were about to learn what that meant. Enemy moving, reported Ensign Hana. They've noticed us. Changing course to intercept. The Voidborn turned with horrible grace. Thousands of organic ships began drifting toward the human fleet. They didn't move like normal spacecraft. There were no engine burns, no course corrections. They simply decided to go somewhere and went, as if space itself bent to their will. Taiyang studied the enemy formation on his tactical display. There was something odd about it. The Voidborn weren't deploying strategically. They were just coming forward, all of them in a massive blob, like water flowing downhill. "They don't have tactics," he said aloud, surprised. Captain Yuna's face appeared on his screen. Her destroyer was positioned on the fleet's edge. "What do you mean?" "Look at them. They're not flanking. They're not using their numerical advantage to surround us. They're just charging straight ahead in a mass." Taiyang felt something like hope spark in his chest. They've never needed strategy before. They always had enough numbers to just overwhelm their enemies. "Then they've never fought humans," Yuna said with a fierce grin. "All ships in Thunder Group prepare for Pattern Omega. Let's teach them about misdirection." The first Voidborn ships came into weapons range. They were horrific up close. Taiyang could see their surfaces moving, breathing, shifting. Tendrils reached out toward the human fleet like grasping hands. The larger ones opened sections that looked like mouths, revealing organic cannons that pulsed with green light. "They're charging weapons," Minho warned. "Fire first," Taiyang ordered. "All batteries, open fire." The Indomitable's massive railguns spoke. Tungsten slugs accelerated to incredible speeds, crossing the distance in seconds. They slammed into the nearest Voidborn construct, punching holes clean through its body. Green fluid sprayed into space. The creature shuddered but kept coming. "Hits confirmed. But it's still moving," Minho reported. "Then hit it again," Taiyang said. Across the fleet, thousands of human weapons opened fire simultaneously. The space between the two forces lit up with missiles, energy beams, and kinetic rounds. The Voidborn returned fire with their organic weapons, green bolts of something that looked like condensed plague energy. The first human ship died 3 minutes into the battle. The destroyer Valiant took a direct hit from one of the moon-sized Voidborn constructs. Its shields collapsed and the green energy ate through the hull like acid. Taiyang watched helplessly as the ship broke apart, 300 crew members dying in an instant. But humans learned fast. They always had. It was one of their few advantages in a galaxy full of species that had been in space for thousands of years. Where ancient races relied on tradition and established doctrine, humans improvised. Captain Soman's carrier group demonstrated this perfectly. Instead of engaging the Voidborn directly, her fighters began racing past them, firing as they went. The enemy constructs tried to follow but were too slow and clumsy. By the time they turned around, the human fighters were already behind them, hitting their vulnerable rear sections. Yuna's destroyer group used a different tactic. They positioned themselves between the larger Voidborn and the planet. When the creatures tried to get past them to reach Valaxis Prime, the destroyers would suddenly accelerate, forcing the Voidborn to choose between pursuing the ships or continuing toward the planet. Every time the Voidborn chose the planet, the destroyers would unleash everything they had into the creatures' backs. Specialist Hana, working at her science station, made a crucial discovery. "Commander, I'm detecting a pattern. The Voidborn all seem to react to threats at the same time, with about a 3-second delay." "They're sharing a mind," Taiyang realized. "They see what one sees, but it takes time for the information to spread through the whole swarm." 3 seconds. It wasn't much, but humans had won battles with less. Taiyang immediately opened a channel to Admiral Hyun and explained Hana's discovery. Hyun's response was instant. "All ships, new attack pattern. We're going to exploit that delay. Battle groups 1 through 10, engage from the front. Count 3 seconds, then battle groups 11 through 20, hit them from the side. 3 more seconds, then groups 21 through 30 hit from behind." It worked beautifully. The Voidborn would react to the frontal assault, turning their weapons and attention forward. 3 seconds later, when the side attack came, they were caught off guard. By the time they processed that threat and turned, the rear attack was already hitting them. Human ships still died. The destroyer Fearless was torn apart by grasping tendrils. The cruiser Determination took a green bolt that melted half its crew. Fighter pilots sacrificed themselves, ramming their craft into Voidborn weak points when they ran out of ammunition. But for every human ship that fell, 3 Voidborn constructs were destroyed. The battle raged for 6 hours. It felt like 6 years. Taiyang's throat was raw from giving orders. Minyo's eyes were red from staring at screens. Hana had fallen asleep at her station twice and been woken by proximity alarms. Everyone was running on adrenaline and desperation. Then, suddenly, the Voidborn began to retreat. It wasn't a coordinated withdrawal. They simply started pulling back, drifting away from Valaxis Prime. The hive mind had calculated the odds and decided this battle was no longer worth the cost. "They're running," Una said over the channel. She sounded amazed. "They're actually running." Admiral Hyun's voice came through, tired but triumphant. "All ships hold position. Do not pursue. Secure the perimeter around Valaxis Prime." The Terran Armada had lost 2,000 ships. 60,000 crew members were dead, but Valaxis Prime was saved. 3 billion people still lived. And across the galaxy, every species with sensors pointed at that system had watched humanity do something the Voidborn had never experienced before. The humans had made them bleed. More than that, they had made them retreat. On the surface of Valaxis Prime, the Luminari people looked up at their sky and saw human ships standing guard. Ambassador Silth, who had sent the desperate plea for help, sent a new message to the Indomitable. "Thank you. We will never forget this." Commander Taeyang read the message and smiled tiredly. Then he looked at his exhausted crew and thought about the 60,000 humans who would never go home. The victory felt hollow and heavy at the same time. "Sir," Minho said quietly. "The war isn't over, is it?" "No," Taeyang answered. "This was just the first battle. The Voidborn will be back. Then we'll be here," said a new voice. Captain Una had come aboard the Indomitable. She stood at the bridge entrance, her uniform torn and stained. "Humans don't quit halfway through a fight." Taeyang nodded. Outside the windows, the Terran Armada held position around a world that wasn't theirs, protecting people who had once scorned them. It was the most human thing imaginable, doing what was right simply because it was right. The universe had needed help. The Terran Armada had answered, and they weren't done yet. 3 months later, Commander Taeyang looked like a different person. His uniform hung looser on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hands had developed a slight tremor from too many stimulant pills and too little sleep. Every officer in the fleet looked the same. War had a way of grinding people down. The Terran Armada had pushed the Voidborn back through 7 star systems. 7 victories. 7 worlds saved. But the cost grew steeper with each battle. The fleet that had started with 30,000 ships now numbered fewer than 20,000. Every day brought more funerals. Every night brought more nightmares. Lieutenant Minho stared at his tactical screen with red eyes. He worked in 4-hour shifts now. Everyone did. There weren't enough crew members left to do it any other way. Sleep, work, eat, work, sleep. The pattern repeated endlessly, blurring days into weeks into months. "Contact," Minho said, his voice flat with exhaustion. Voidborn signatures detected at the edge of the Corvin system. Multiple contacts, large formation. Taeyang nodded slowly. The Corvin system. 3 inhabited planets. Home to 2 council species. The insect-like Prithians and the aquatic Narel. Both species had ancient cultures that dated back millions of years. Neither had strong militaries. They had relied on the Council's protection. That protection had failed. "How many?" Taeyang asked. "At least 30,000 individual signatures, possibly more behind them." 30,000. The Terran Armada now numbered 18,000 ships, and many of those were damaged, running on emergency repairs held together with hope and welding. The odds had never been good in this war, but they were getting worse. Captain Yuna's face appeared on the screen. Her destroyer Thunderstrike had survived every battle so far, but barely. Scorch marks covered its hull. One of its main guns was completely gone. "We need to fall back," she said, and Taeyang heard how much those words cost her. "We can't win this one." "If we fall back, the Corvin system falls," Taeyang replied. "If we stay, we might all die." "Might. Not certainly." Una closed her eyes. "You're right. Damn it, you're right. When did we become the people who throw themselves at impossible odds?" "About 3 months ago," Taeyang said with a thin smile. "When we decided the Council's problems were our problems too." Captain Sumin commanded the carrier group positioned near the system's outer planets. Her voice cut into the conversation. "I've been analyzing the Voidborn attack patterns. They're changing, adapting. These aren't the mindless swarms we fought at Valaxis Prime. They're using tactics now. That was the terrifying truth that everyone in the fleet had noticed, but nobody wanted to say aloud. The Voidborn were learning. Each battle taught them something new. They had started to flank. They had started to feint. They had started to target command ships specifically, trying to cut off the fleet's coordination. Ensign Hana, now promoted to lieutenant after her previous superior died in the third battle, pulled up data on her screen. They're learning from us. Every tactic we use, they eventually counter. It's like fighting our own reflection. Admiral Hyun called an emergency meeting of all ship commanders. 30 captains had attended the first meeting months ago. Now only 19 remained. The others were dead, their ships destroyed in the fighting. The survivors gathered on the Indomitable's bridge via hologram, too exhausted to travel in person. Intelligence Officer Ji-won has discovered something, Hyun said. His voice was rough, aged another decade by 3 months of war. Ji-won, show them. A young woman appeared on screen. Intelligence Officer Ji-won looked barely old enough to be in the military, but her eyes were hard. She had seen things no one her age should see. We've been tracking Voidborn movements across all sectors. There's a pattern. Every swarm, every attack fleet, they all trace back to a single point in space. A cluster of dead stars about 7 jumps from our current position. She pulled up a map. At its center was a dark region, empty of light. We believe this is the Voidborn core, the center of their hive mind. If we can destroy it, we might be able to end this war. Silence filled the channel. Every commander understood what that meant. 7 jumps, through the heaviest Voidborn concentrations they had ever seen. Through regions of space so consumed by the alien swarm that even sensors struggled to function properly. Humans called it the dead zone. That's suicide, said Commander Daehyun, who had voted against the war at the start. He had been right to worry, but he had fought as hard as anyone when the time came. We'd be lucky if half the fleet survived the journey. We'd be lucky if a quarter survived, Ji-won corrected coldly. But the alternative is fighting this war until we run out of ships. We're losing. Slowly, but we're losing. The Voidborn can replace their forces faster than we can. They consume planets and turn all that biomass into more ships. We build ours in shipyards that take months. The math doesn't favor us. Admiral Hyun looked at each commander in turn. I'm putting this to a vote. It's not regulation. It might even be cowardice. But I'm asking people to die, and they deserve a voice. Do we fall back to council space and try to hold a defensive line? Or do we push forward to the dead zone and try to end this? Taeyang voted first. Forward. We came here to win. Yuna was next. Forward. We don't get this far just to quit. Soman followed. Forward. My crew deserves to know their sacrifice meant something. One by one, the commanders voted. Forward. 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 Not a single vote for retreat. Some voices shook. Some commanders cried as they spoke. But all of them chose to keep fighting. Then we go, Hyun said simply. May whatever gods exist have mercy on us. The fleet prepared for the deepest push into enemy territory yet. Engineer Do-hyun and his repair crews worked miracles, cannibalizing destroyed ships to fix damaged ones. Every weapon was checked. Every shield was calibrated. Every crew member wrote letters home just in case. Taeyang wrote his letter to his younger brother on Earth. He kept it simple. I'm sorry I won't see you grow up. I'm fighting so you'll have the chance to. That's enough for me. The Terran Armada jumped into the dead zone. The name fit perfectly. The stars here were old and dying, giving off sickly red light. Debris from 1,000 destroyed worlds drifted in the darkness. And everywhere, were the Voidborn. The first ambush came within hours. Voidborn ships materialized from what looked like empty space, hidden in debris fields. The destroyer Courage was destroyed before it could even return fire. The cruiser Justice lasted longer but still fell, torn apart by organic weapons. They lost 42 ships in the first week. Every jump brought new attacks. Every system held new horrors. The crew's morale began to crack. Fights broke out. Some officers advocated retreat. A few crew members attempted to sabotage their own ships, preferring to be court-martialed than face another battle. Taeyang found Lieutenant Minho sitting in a hallway at 0300 hours, his head in his hands. The young officer was crying quietly. "I can't do this anymore," Minho whispered. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the ships exploding. I hear the screaming on the channels when crews realize they're about to die." Taeyang sat down beside him. For a long moment he said nothing, then, "Yeah, me too." Minho looked up, surprised. "Sir?" "I'm terrified," Taeyang admitted. "Every single day. I'm scared we'll lose. I'm scared everyone will die and it'll be my fault for not being smart enough or fast enough. I'm scared that we'll win, but I won't be alive to see it." He smiled weakly. "Fear is human, Minho. What matters is what we do with it." "What do we do with it?" "We keep going. Not because we're fearless. Because we're afraid and we choose to act anyway." Lieutenant Hana found a pattern in the Voidborn movements. They always attacked from the same direction, toward the core, as if they were being pulled back to protect it. "They're afraid," she realized. "They know what we're trying to do, and they're afraid we might succeed." That discovery changed everything. The Voidborn could feel fear. They weren't unstoppable. They weren't invincible. They were just another enemy, and enemies could be beaten. "Not one step back," Captain Yuna said during a fleet-wide broadcast. She was standing on the bridge of her battered destroyer, visible wounds on her face from a recent attack. "That's our new motto. We've come too far, lost too much, given too many lives. We go forward, or we die trying, but we do not step back." The phrase spread through the fleet like wildfire. Crew members painted it on bulkheads, tattooed it on their skin, whispered it before battle. Not one step back. The Terran Armada pushed deeper into the dead zone. Ship after ship fell, but the survivors grew harder, tougher, more determined. The worse things got, the more stubborn they became. It was the most human trait imaginable. When faced with impossible odds, they simply refused to accept that impossible meant anything. Admiral Hyun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as they prepared for the final jump. The core was just ahead. One more jump and they would face the heart of the Voidborn hive mind. He looked at his crew, at these young people who had aged a lifetime in 3 months. "Whatever happens next," he said, "I want you all to know something. You are the bravest souls I have ever met. History will remember this day. History will remember that when the galaxy needed heroes, humans answered the call." The fleet jumped into the core system. What they found there was beyond nightmare. The Voidborn core hung in space like a god that had learned to hate. It was massive beyond comprehension, a structure the size of a small star. Its surface pulsed with organic life, breathing and shifting and watching. Millions of eyes opened across its skin. Millions of mouths screamed silently into the void. It was alive in a way that made every human who looked at it feel sick. Commander Taeyang stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and forced himself to keep looking at it. This was the enemy. This was the thing that had consumed 17 worlds. This was what they had come to kill. "Defensive swarm reading," Lieutenant Minho reported. His voice had gone flat, empty of emotion. It was the only way to cope anymore. I can't even count them, sir. There must be millions."
Individual Voidborn constructs forming a sphere around the core. Weapons charging across all contacts. Admiral Hyun's voice came through the fleet channel.
"All ships, this is it. Everything we've done for the past 3 months has led to this moment. Every friend we've lost, every wound we've taken, every nightmare we've had. It ends here one way or another." Captain Yuna sat in her command chair aboard the Thunderstrike. Her ship looked like it had been through a war, which it had. Half its hull was patch jobs. One engine operated at 60% capacity. But it could still fight, and that was all that mattered. "Thunder Division ready for frontal assault." "We know our job." Captain Soman prepared her carrier group for launch. Thousands of fighter craft waited in the launch bays, pilots strapped in and ready. Many of those pilots wouldn't survive the next hour. They all knew it. They launched anyway. What nobody outside the command staff knew was that the Terran Armada had been planning this moment since entering the dead zone. Every retreat that seemed like weakness, every battle that ended in apparent stalemate, every time they had pulled back when they could have pushed forward. All of it had been gathering data. Lieutenant Minho had been recording every void-born response pattern. Every time they attacked, every time they defended, every time they moved. Thousands of battles, millions of data points, all compiled into a psychological profile of something that wasn't supposed to have psychology. The hive mind thinks like a single entity, Minho had explained during the planning session, but it's not. It's billions of individual minds forced to work together. There are lags, delays, moments of confusion when too much happens at once. Can we exploit that? Taeyang had asked. We can overload it, that was the plan. Overwhelm the void-born consciousness with so much input that it couldn't process everything at once. Create chaos in a mind that thrived on order. Lieutenant Hana had done her part too, working with captured void-born samples. Human immune systems were aggressive, creative, adaptable. She had weaponized that into a biological virus that would attack the void-born's collective consciousness itself. It won't kill them, Hana had said, but it will set them free. Every void-born construct used to be something else. Some other species that got consumed and absorbed. The virus will break the hive mind's control. They'll remember what they were. Now, facing the core and its millions of defenders, Taeyang hoped the plan would work. If it didn't, the entire fleet would die here. 18,000 ships against millions. Not even human stubbornness could beat those odds. Thunder Division, begin attack run, Admiral Hyun ordered. Captain Yuna took a deep breath. You heard the Admiral. All ships full forward. Let's get their attention. The Thunder Division accelerated toward the core. 1,400 ships, all that remained of the original Thunder Division, charged directly at the void-born defensive sphere. They were a sacrifice play. Everyone in those ships knew it. They were drawing the hive mind's focus, forcing it to concentrate on the frontal assault. Void-born weapons opened fire. Green bolts of condensed plague energy filled space. The destroyer shield took the first hit and exploded instantly. The cruiser Steadfast lasted 3 seconds longer. Ships began dying by the dozens, then by the hundreds, but Thunder Division kept coming. They fired everything they had, missiles, railguns, energy weapons, anything that could damage the enemy. And more importantly, they transmitted on every frequency, sent out every sensor pulse, created as much noise and confusion as possible. Phase 2, Hyun ordered. Captain Soman launched her fighters. Not hundreds, not thousands, tens of thousands. Every carrier in the fleet emptied its bays simultaneously. The fighter craft spread out in a cloud that looked like a swarm of insects. Each one transmitted a signal that mimicked a full-sized warship. The void-born sensors couldn't tell the difference between a fighter and a battleship when there were so many targets. The hive mind tried to track them all. Its attention fractured. Some void-born constructs turned toward the fighters. Others stayed focused on Thunder Division. Still others seemed confused, turning in random directions. It's working, Lieutenant Jiwon reported from intelligence. The hive mind is struggling to process all the input. Neural lag has increased to 7 seconds. 7 seconds. An eternity in combat. Taeyang smiled grimly. Phase 3. All remaining ships, engines to 0. Drift protocol. Every ship in the fleet cut its engines. Momentum carried them forward, but they weren't accelerating anymore. They weren't maneuvering. On sensors, they looked like debris. Just wreckage floating through space, not worth the hive mind's attention. Admiral Hyun led this final group personally. The Indomitable drifted silently toward the core, surrounded by 7,000 other ships, all of them dark, all of them silent. Ghosts sliding through the chaos of battle. The Voidborn didn't notice them. The hive mind was too busy tracking Thunder Division and the fighter swarm. Too busy trying to understand why there were so many targets. Too busy being overwhelmed by information. The Ghost Fleet drifted closer, closer, into weapons range, into optimal firing position. Taeyang watched the distance countdown on his screen. 3,000 kilometers. 2,000. 1,000. Deploy the virus, Hyun ordered. Lieutenant Hana initiated the launch sequence. Every ship in the Ghost Fleet fired specially modified missiles. Not explosive warheads, biological ones. The missiles scattered across the defensive sphere, each one carrying Hana's virus. The Voidborn constructs absorbed them automatically, thinking they were just normal human weapons. The virus spread through the hive mind like fire through dry grass. One construct, 10, 100, 1,000. Each infected voidborn suddenly remembered what it had been before. The insect-like Prithian, the aquatic Narel, the rock-skinned Torvin. Dozens of species, all enslaved by the voidborn, all suddenly free. Chaos erupted through the defensive sphere. Constructs turned on each other. Some simply stopped moving, overwhelmed by the return of individuality after so long as slaves. Others began attacking the core itself, seeking revenge for what had been done to them. All ships open fire, Hyun commanded. Everything we have. End this now. 7,000 ships suddenly came to life. Engines blazed. Weapons fired. The darkness lit up with human fury. They targeted the core directly, ignoring the defensive sphere. Fusion torpedoes, mass drivers, particle beams. Everything humanity had invented for killing was unleashed in a single massive strike. The core shuddered. Its surface rippled. Cracks appeared in its organic armor. Green fluid sprayed into space. But it was too big, too strong. It would take more than conventional weapons. Deploy the planet killer, Admiral Hyun said quietly. Every human on the bridge looked at him. The planet killer was the weapon they had sworn never to use, a device so powerful it could crack a world in half. Humanity had built one just in case and then tried to forget it existed. Sir, Taeyang said carefully, that weapon has never been tested. Then this is its test, Hyun replied. We came here to end the Voidborn. This ends them. The Indomitable opened its belly. A single missile launched, larger than most fighters. It accelerated toward the core, burning through the chaos of battle. Voidborn constructs tried to intercept it. Freed constructs tried to protect it. The missile dodged, weaved, and flew on. It struck the core dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then light bloomed from inside the organic structure. Not the light of explosions. The light of fusion itself, of matter converting directly to energy. The core began to come apart from the inside. The shockwave hit the human fleet 3 minutes later. Ships tumbled through space. Shields overloaded. Systems shut down. But they survived. They had positioned themselves carefully, anticipating the blast. The core exploded. The detonation was visible from 3 star systems away. When it cleared, the core was gone. In its place was only debris and scattered organic matter, already dying in the cold of space. Across 17 sectors, every void-born construct suddenly stopped moving. Some collapsed. Some exploded. Some simply drifted. Their connection to the hive mind severed. The war was over. Captain Yuna sat in her command chair, tears running down her face. Thunder Division had started with 1,400 ships. 12 survived. 12 ships out of 1,400. But they had done their job. They had bought the time needed to win. Captain Soman counted her fighters. Of the tens of thousands launched, fewer than 1,000 returned. The rest were gone, pilots who had given everything so humanity could win. The memorial service was held on Valaxis Prime, the first world humanity had saved. Commander Taeyang stood among thousands of people, human and alien alike, watching as names scrolled across a massive holographic display. 400,000 names. 400,000 humans who had gone to war and never came home. It took 3 days to read all the names aloud. 3 days of constant remembrance. The galaxy watched, and for the first time they truly understood what humanity had sacrificed. Not just ships, not just resources, people, individuals with families and dreams and futures that would never happen. Admiral Hyun had refused the Galactic Council's offer of a grand celebration. We didn't do this for glory, he had said. We did it because it was right. Celebrate if you want. We'll be mourning our dead. The council had agreed. Instead of parades and ceremonies, they built memorials. One at every battle site. Each memorial bore the names of the fallen, carved in stone that would last 10,000 years. The galaxy would remember. The galaxy would never forget. Captain Yuna walked among the ruins of what had been Thunder Division's assembly area. She was one of only 140 survivors from a force that had numbered 1,400 ships. Every face she saw was marked by loss. Every person had lost friends, colleagues, sometimes entire crews they had known for years. Do you think it was worth it? Asked Lieutenant Borum, one of her surviving officers. He had lost an arm in the final battle, replaced now with a mechanical prosthetic. Yuna looked up at the sky where Valaxis Prime's 3 moons hung in daylight. Children played in the streets laughing. Families walked together, alive because humans had chosen to fight. Yes, she said quietly. It was worth it. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Every species sent their representatives. The chamber was filled with beings of every shape and size. Creatures that breathed oxygen and creatures that breathed methane. Species that lived underwater and species that lived in vacuum. All of them had one thing in common. They owed their lives to humanity. Ambassador Silth of the Luminary stood to speak. This was the same ambassador who had sent the desperate plea for help 3 months ago. She looked older now, aged by the weight of what she had witnessed. For 2,000 years the Luminary have been part of the Galactic Council. For 2,000 years we believed ourselves wise and ancient. We looked at humanity and saw children. Violent, chaotic, primitive children who had barely left their homeworld. She paused and her glowing eyes swept across the chamber. We were wrong, murmurs filled the room. A luminary admitting error was almost unheard of. Humanity taught us something we had forgotten in our centuries of peace and prosperity. They taught us that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to act despite fear. They taught us that age does not equal wisdom. They taught us that sometimes the newest voice in the room has the most important thing to say. Silth turned to face the human delegation. Engineer Do-hyun represented Terra now, chosen because he had kept the fleet running when everyone said it was impossible. Beside him sat Captain Somin and Lieutenant Jiwon. Admiral Hyun had refused to attend, saying his place was with his crews, not in political chambers. The Galactic Council offers Terra full membership, Silth announced, not as junior members, not as probationary participants, as full and equal partners in this alliance. We offer you a seat on the High Command. We offer you authority over your own sectors and protection for any species you choose to shelter. We offer you our gratitude and our friendship. The chamber erupted in approval. Every species present voted yes. It was unanimous. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. Do-hyun stood slowly. He was a simple engineer, not a diplomat, and he looked uncomfortable in the formal setting. But his voice was steady when he spoke. Terra accepts membership in the Galactic Council, but we have conditions. The chamber fell silent. Conditions? No new member had ever demanded conditions. First, we want complete autonomy in our sectors. No council interference in how we govern ourselves or our allies. Do-hyun ticked off on his fingers. Second, we want guarantees that no species will ever be dismissed or ignored because they're too young or too different. The next threat might be stopped by people you haven't met yet. Listen to them. Third, we want resources dedicated to helping species displaced by the Voidborn War. Refugees need homes. Orphans need families. That's not optional. That's required. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from a dozen species. And finally, we want a promise. Never again will the Council wait until catastrophe strikes to ask for help. You have allies now. Use them. Work together. That's what being a council means. The conditions were harsh, unprecedented, and the Council agreed to all of them within an hour. Humanity had earned the right to make demands. Commander Taeyang returned to the Indomitable. The ship was being repaired in orbit, held together by emergency patches and prayer. It would never be the same. Too much damage. Too many scars. But it would fly again. He found Lieutenant Minho on the bridge staring out at the stars. The young officer had aged a decade in 3 months. They all had. What happens now? Minho asked. We go home, Taeyang said. Most of us. Some will stay here to help rebuild. Some will join the Council peacekeepers. But most of us go home to Earth and Mars and the colonies. We rest, we heal, we remember. And then we make sure this never happens again. Captain Summon began training Council fleet officers in Terran tactics. Officers from a dozen species came to study with her. They learned about distributed swarm tactics. They learned about exploiting enemy weaknesses. They learned about fighting with courage when victory seemed impossible. Why are you sharing this? Asked a Prothean officer. These tactics give humanity an advantage. Why give that away? Soman smiled. Because next time we might need you to save us. Better we all know how to fight together. Lieutenant Jiwon worked with Council intelligence services, sharing everything humanity had learned about the Voidborn. The data was distributed freely across all species. No secrets. No classified information. If another threat emerged, the galaxy would face it together. Lieutenant Hana led the effort to rehabilitate freed void-born constructs. Thousands of beings who had been enslaved by the hive mind were now free but traumatized. They remembered what they had done while controlled. They remembered the worlds they had consumed. It wasn't your fault, Hana told them over and over. You were prisoners, victims. Now you're free and you get to choose what you become. Many of those freed beings chose to join the relief efforts. They helped rebuild worlds they had once attacked. They used their unique understanding of void-born biology to clean up the contamination left behind. They sought redemption through service. Admiral Hyun never returned to active duty. He retired to a small house on Earth where he could see the ocean. Every morning he planted a tree, one tree for every ship lost, 400 trees each day. It took him 3 years to plant them all. When reporters asked why he was doing it, Hyun said simply, each ship had a crew. Each crew had people. Those people deserved to come home. They didn't. The least I can do is give them roots on the world they died protecting. The forest grew. Over the years, it became a sacred place. Families of the fallen would visit. Children who had never known their parents would walk among the trees. The Admiral's Forest, they called it. A living memorial to human sacrifice. 20% of the Terran Armada volunteered to stay in council space as peacekeepers. They would patrol trade routes, respond to distress calls, and help maintain peace across the galaxy. Captain Yuna commanded this peacekeeping force. She felt she owed it to the people who had died under her command. I couldn't save them, she told Taeyang before he left. But I can make sure their sacrifice meant something. I can make sure this peace they bought with their lives lasts. Taeyang understood. Every survivor carried that weight. The need to make the deaths matter. The need to build something good from all that loss. On Earth, parades were held for the returning fleet. Millions of people lined the streets cheering and crying and waving flags. The survivors walked through the crowds, overwhelmed by the attention. They were heroes, people said. They had saved the galaxy, but the veterans didn't feel like heroes. Heroes were people in stories larger than life. They were just people who had done what needed to be done. People who had been scared every day but kept going anyway. Commander Taeyang retired from active service. He took a teaching position at the Terran Naval Academy, training the next generation of officers. On the first day of class, he told his students something that would become famous across the fleet. You're going to hear stories about the Void-Born War, stories about brave heroes who never felt fear. Those stories are lies. We were terrified. Every single day, fear is human. Fear is normal. What matters is what you do with that fear. He looked at the young faces in front of him. The galaxy will face new threats, new challenges. And when that happens, people will look to humanity. Not because we're the strongest, not because we're the smartest, but because we don't quit. We don't give up on people just because the odds are bad. That's what makes us human.